Hello.
Hello.
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you. So let's do some other intros. So if you are joined, I'm gonna call on you, but if you can't talk, that's okay. I mean, we're fine. Scott and Kelly, do you want to start? Just say who you are, where you're at. So for folks who don't know you.
Good morning,
Hi,
everyone. My name is Scott. Oh, I'll let you go, Kelly.
yeah, go ahead, Scott.
My name is Scott Cunningham. Happy New Year, everyone. I am from the Educational Opportunity Program, so I'm one of the counselors at EOP.
Thank you, Scott. Kelly, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Kelly Exware. I'm also one of the APCs in EOP.
Great. Dan.
I am Dan Wood from Music.
Excellent. Colleen. Maybe. Colleen, do you want to introduce yourself? Okay. How about Jacob?
Hello, this is Jake Hedges. I'm from the Counseling Services Center on campus. I'm a senior counselor.
And Jay Zhang?
Hello, Kristen and everyone. This is Jay from SUNY Broadport. Thanks for having me.
Hi. Okay, anybody else? I don't see anybody else. So we're talking about procrastination today. Fabulous, fascinating topic. So I'm going to start with I'm going to read you a little case from this lovely book. But there we go. Procrastination by Fuchsia Sirois, and we'll talk a little bit more about resources. But I like this case because it is kind of boring. So it's something that we may have all experienced. So here we go. Yet another day has passed, and Pat finds himself struggling to sit down and get to work on his task. It's that same task he has attempted to complete for 3 days in a row, but with no success. It's that same task that he knows he has to get done today, or he will be letting people down and breaking promises that will cost them and him money. It's that same task that has made it hard for him to fall asleep at night because he is worried about whether he can do a good enough job on it. Today, when he sits down, he notices his chair isn't quite comfortable. So Pat convinces himself that a more comfortable chair is what he needs to finally get this task done. While going to retrieve the comfy chair from the other room, he notices a pile of papers sitting in disarray that needs to be tidied and organized. So he spends a few minutes organizing and filing. Pat decides to treat himself for being busy, getting something done, with a well-deserved break on social media. 2 hours later, he realizes that he's now hungry and it's lunchtime, so he decides it's best not to start the task until he's eaten. After that, he'll have better ideas, think more clearly, and have flashes of inspiration when he has a full stomach and no distracting stomach gurgling. After lunch, Pat feels sluggish and sleepy and even less motivated because there's now only half a day to work on a task that he reckons will take the whole day to complete. He reasons that it's best to wait to start until tomorrow and to get a fresh start after going to bed early and getting a good night's sleep. But as Pat is trying to fall asleep, he's flooded with feelings of guilt, shame, and regret for not making progress with that task today. His thoughts turn to an unhelpful chorus of, why couldn't I just get started? And what's wrong with me? And further amplifies how bad he feels. He realizes that it's again going to be difficult to sleep. He needs a distraction. So he decides to get on his smartphone and view TikTok or YouTube videos as a distraction to chase away the negative feelings so that he can fall asleep. 2 hours and more videos than he can remember later, Pat is no closer to falling asleep or to feeling less ashamed of his lack of productivity and broken promises. It's now well past the time he wanted to fall asleep, and his hope of being well rested so that he can have a productive day tomorrow is quickly fading. And so ends another day of procrastination with unfilled responsibilities, lingering shame and guilt, and yet another night of broken and restless sleep. So I really like this example. As I said, it's from Fuchsia Sirois' book because it's boring. I mean, this is something that so many people have experienced, the big task that you're really having a hard time getting on. You feel this escalating cycle of guilt and shame. It interferes with sleep. It just feels heavier and heavier and more difficult. It's boring, but really illustrative. So So welcome again for those who've joined, and oh, thank you, Colleen. And good to have you. So I'm going to share my screen real quick. With these two lovely quotes from Alice in Wonderland, which are unrelated, but they're both in Alice in Wonderland. I don't see how he can ever finish if he doesn't begin. And begin at the beginning and go on until the end. Then stop. So John humored me with the title was a joke, by the way. If you didn't get it, it was a joke. But I did actually fix the title because I like the title Understanding Procrastination better now that I have a stronger focus. So we're going to spend some time talking a little bit about the way that researchers look at procrastination, what it is, and what it's related to, what the research supports in terms of how we can manage our own procrastination, as well as how we can maybe apply some of that to the classroom and help our students manage their procrastination. So we're going to be talking about both emphases, a little bit about managing it on an individual level and a bit about managing it at the student and classroom level. But if you have a particular passion, like you really want to spend more time on one or the other, just drop it in the chat and I will accommodate. So procrastination needs to have a clear definition for research to happen, right? Because without a clear definition, it's kind of chaotic about what people are researching. So the definition that is most commonly used in research is very similar to this, has all of these components. So let's look at these different components so we're all clear on what we're talking about together. Procrastination is a common self-regulation problem involving the unnecessary and voluntary delay in the start or completion of important intended tasks, despite the recognition that this delay may have negative consequences. So some of the pieces to pay attention to here. One is that this is not reprioritizing. So saying this time-consuming task is important, but is not as important as this other more important task. So I'm going to put it on the back burner while I do this more important thing. That's reprioritizing. It is not a voluntary delay with the recognition that it's going to have negative consequences. It's also not an involuntary delay where you're saying something like, there is a maintenance issue in my house that I need to take care of, but I don't have the money right now. So I'm going to wait, even though it's urgent, I'm going to wait a bit until I have the money. That's not a voluntary delay. That's an involuntary delay. It's not under your immediate control whether you have the money. You're going to take some control and hold off a bit. Similarly, if you were going to do the work yourself and you broke your leg, you have to wait for your leg to heal. That's involuntary delay. It's not procrastination. It's also not the same thing as sagacious or wise delay. Wise delay is the idea that, yes, there's something important that you have to get to, but you see some advantage to waiting in terms of the task being better completed. So perhaps there's information that you don't have right now. So you're going to wait until you get that information. Or perhaps you're weighing the best course of action. So you're going to sleep on it and you're going to get input from other people. That's sagacious or wise delay, not procrastination. You're not delaying, recognizing that there are going to be negative consequences. And one way to look at this is that all procrastination is delay, but all delay is not procrastination. So one reason to talk about this is that in research, they separate these two pieces out, but also you can let go of some of the guilt of if there's something that you haven't been doing because you don't have enough information to do it, or you don't have, you have too many other things going on and you've reprioritized. You're not procrastinating there. You're making choices that are logical choices. Another, I did add this as well, that everybody procrastinates. Almost everybody procrastinates. It's almost a universal experience. It's more of an issue when it becomes chronic, kind of a preferred method of dealing with demands. Sirois and Mitchell also extended this definition to emphasize the self-regulation component, that it's a form of self-regulation failure that involves prioritizing short-term mood repair over long-term pursuit of intended actions. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit more detail as well. But the idea, the heart, the little core of procrastination is that you're making a choice in the short term in order to regulate your mood. But in the long term, it's going to come back and bite you. Other things that procrastination are not. One is procrastination is not a time management issue. One way that we know this, for example, is that if you teach people better time management strategies, it can improve procrastination in the very short term, but it doesn't typically improve procrastination in the longer term. Another way that we know this is that people can practice procrastination selectively, so they can have great time management around XYZ and really intense procrastination around ABC. It's also not laziness. Just not. It's not. We have really strong cultural messages that people who procrastinate are lazy, and these are just not true. Oftentimes, people who are using procrastination a lot as a mood regulation strategy are very active, and very active in lots of ways. I'm sure you know people who are who clean and organize and bake and work on huge other projects when they're procrastinating something else. Not laziness. So, you curious about your own procrastination? Let's do a quick assessment. Hold on. And sorry for those of you in the room, I will send this to you. In fact, if you want, I'll send it to everybody who's on the Zoom list. So I'm not sure I have everyone's email address. Who else is in the room? Is that Ramin? Ah, okay.
You
Okay.
can't get enough of me.
That's right. I can't. Okay, let me put the file in. So what I've got for you is the short there. The general procrastination scale, which is a 9-item scale, so it will only take you a few minutes. I put it in the chat as an Excel file because if you download it in Excel, I've set it up so you can just answer the questions real quick and it'll give you your total score. And we'll take a couple minutes to do that. And at the same time, I will email it to our folks in the room.
What's the deadline for completing this? That's really good.
Okay, and somebody's going to tell me, right, if the form is broken, because it should not be broken. Okay, we'll just take one more minute. Okay, now, like every great self-assessment form, and this one's pretty good. It shouldn't surprise you. If you already know that procrastination is something that you really struggle with, you probably scored kind of high. And if you already know that procrastination is really not an issue for you, you probably scored pretty low. That doesn't mean the form is wrong. It actually means it's it's probably on solid ground. But it's always nice to know how you compare on a measure that's used in both research and practice. I'm going to share my screen again. And for those of you who just joined us, if you didn't get the form, drop me an email and I will send it to you if you want to take it yourself. How common is procrastination? I said I think it's nearly universal, which I think is true, but only to a small degree. And it's difficult to estimate in the adult population, but it's probably about 15 to 25% of adults that habitually procrastinate. It's extremely common in college students. About 80 to 95% of college students report procrastination, with about 50% doing it on a regular basis. And one of the reasons is that procrastination tends to decline a bit as you age. Also is more common in young adult men, slightly more common than in at other ages or versus women. But also young adults are still developing executive function. So their ability to self regulate is still developing. And academia, by its nature of how we structure it, is ripe for procrastination. We have a lot of very specific deadlines, some of which are very far in the future, setting us up repeatedly for procrastination. So it's rampant in academia. And by the way, students who tend to use procrastination as a habitual coping mechanism are also more likely to report academic dishonesty, which is probably a way to cope with being really late on the work and deadlines. How about in the workplace? So estimates in the workplace also vary. In a survey of over 2,000 employees, researchers found that people waste an average of 4 hours a day of their workday procrastinating, whereas Davies estimated that it was about 2 hours a day, or maybe a quarter of the workday. And organizational psychologists usually group the common kinds of procrastination into two categories. One referred to as soldiering since the early 1900s, which I just think is a really funny term because soldiers are not procrastinators. But essentially slow working, like taking long breaks or talking, spending a lot of time socializing, taking a long time to initiate a task, versus cyber procrastination, which has increased a lot over the last 10 years, which is spending a lot of time online doing different things that are not related to the job. Procrastination also varies by culture, but it varies in terms of how acceptable it is and how often people report it. But how acceptable it is, I think, is really interesting. For example, the tolerance for procrastination in Germany is lower than the tolerance in the United States, which is, in other words, they get more upset about the lower levels of procrastination. And in the United States, our tolerance of procrastination is lower than it is in Brazil, for example. So whether or not you consider procrastination to be problematic partly depends upon your cultural background. How does it relate to other concepts? So if you're into psychology, you know about the big five, very stable, different personality trait. So for procrastination, it's related to conscientiousness in the big five and neuroticism. It's negative related to conscientiousness, particularly the planning component. In other words, people who are low in conscientiousness tend to be higher in procrastination and vice versa. And it's positively related to neuroticism. In other words, people who are higher in neuroticism tend to be more likely to procrastinate. It's also related to a type of perfectionism referred to as socially oriented perfectionism. So people who are highly perfectionistic in holding high standards for themselves in a way to please other people. Like I want to be a responsible person and perceived that way by others, or maybe hearing that, like the mother's voice in your head, like, make sure you do this and this and this and you do it just right. That tends to be related to perfectionism. Whereas if to procrastination. Whereas if you're the type of perfectionist that you're just doing it for you just have a very high standard, regardless of what anybody else thinks, not related to perfectionism. It is considered a form of avoidant coping in the coping literature. And this one, in case you didn't know, also has a genetic tie, which if you're into psych, you should know that because the big five also is genetically related. So yes, there is a genetic predisposition to perfectionism, as there are many of them. Chronic procrastination definitely has an impact. It has not, and by chronic, just focus on the word chronic, not occasional procrastination, chronic procrastination has mental health impacts and can increase the risk of depression and anxiety. Kind of the in that first scenario that we read where Pat is experiencing increasing guilt and shame over time as he procrastinates, you can see how that would be related to a risk for depression and anxiety. It's probably also inversely related, not inversely related the other direction, so that people who are more anxious and depressed may be more likely to procrastinate when their symptoms are higher. Also is related to physical health impacts, probably through at least two pathways. One pathway, which has been established in the literature, is a stress-oriented pathway that as people's stress increases as they procrastinate, their immune response changes, and it makes them more likely to become ill. But also because people who are chronic procrastinators may also procrastinate health behaviors. So you have a new pain. Okay? Are you going to go to the doctor to have your new pain checked out? At what point are you going to go to the doctor? At some point, you're going to think, this is probably just one of those weird things. It's just going to go away. How long do you think that? How long until you go? If you know that you need to make some behavior changes for your health, are you going to take those on right now? Or are you going to put them off until later? So procrastination of health behaviors has been well studied in hypertension and heart disease. It definitely has impacts on work. People who chronically procrastinate also end up with lower income. So what kinds of things contribute to procrastination? By the way, you're welcome to jump in at any point if you think you have something awesome you want to say or question. Just either verbally or on chat. So what kinds of things contribute to procrastination? Task characteristics certainly do. Tasks that are unfamiliar, ambiguous, uncertain, unpleasant, stressful, frustrating. A great example that I just ran into was a student working on a thesis and procrastinating the thesis and uncertain how to make progress. And their support person says, well, why don't you ask your thesis advisor how to make progress, what to do with this next task? And the student says, well, I don't want them to know that I'm so behind. So the procrastinating on the thesis, because it was ambiguous and uncertain, increased the shame and guilt so that then they were unable to approach the advisor to resolve the ambiguous, uncertain nature, compounding the procrastination. We've all been there, I think. Maybe not on our thesis, but on something. So a really important aspect that contributes to procrastination is the self-reinforcing nature of avoidance. So let's say that you have a really unpleasant task that you need to do. Pick one. You can pick one in your head. Let's say you need to okay, this one is what?
Clean the bathroom.
Clean the bathroom. I'm gonna share my really stupid one. I think it's stupid because it was so dumb for me. As an undergrad, prior to online banking, I had to call my bank on a regular basis because I was like at school and my bank was over here and I hated calling the bank. It made me super anxious because I always felt like I didn't know what to say and they would know that I was like 18 and like financially ignorant. So I really hated calling my bank and I would put it off. Not long enough that I got in trouble, but long enough that I would get more and more anxious. Okay. So I'm putting off, I need to call the bank. I need to transfer money so that I can pay my bills before online banking. I'm thinking, I need to call the bank. I need to call the bank. I need to call the bank. And I'm getting more anxious because I don't want to call the bank because it's making me anxious. It's dumb. I know it's dumb. I have no problem calling the bank now. I can call the bank. But this anxiety is increasing. I need to call the bank. And then I decide I'm not going to call them right now. I'm gonna do this other thing. Or it's okay if I wait till tomorrow. I'm not going to call them right now. What happens to my anxiety when I decide I'm not going to call them right now?
Just go up.
It goes down. Because I'm just about to call them, like, I don't want to do it. I'm not going to do it right now. Anxiety goes down temporarily, but pretty rapidly. Like, oh, not going to do it. Oh, okay. Now later, it's going to go back up and like even more because I still haven't called them. And now I know I'm practicing this pattern over and over. I'm practicing this pattern that as I get anxious about it, I can just decide not to do it and then I'll get less anxious. As I'm anxious about it, I can just decide not to do it and then I'll get less anxious. And that drop of anxiety reinforces my decision not to do it. The avoidance decision is reinforced by the drop in anxiety. Now, we're not good. As humans, we're not good with future decisions and future consequences. We're much better with decision right now, consequence right now. So this quick drop, this is the thing I'm paying attention to that is building my pattern. What I'm not paying any attention to is the boost in anxiety that I'm going to get next when I try and do that, when I try and call the bank again. It gets higher and higher and higher because my avoidance keeps being reinforced. So avoidance in general is a self-reinforcing cycle. This happens in all kinds of different areas of life. You've had students, or maybe you yourself have been someone who has avoided public speaking in a similar way, where you say, I'm going to give this speech. No, I don't have to do this. I'm not going to do it. I'm going to call in sick. I'm going to skip this class. I'm going to, and that's a self-reinforcing cycle of increasing avoidance. Also, the cycle of guilt and shame works with emotion, and how that works with emotion regulation contributes to procrastination. I think the scenario that we read at the beginning with Pat was a really good example of that, that as you procrastinate, you feel more and more guilty, partly because as a society, we think it's a really bad thing to do. We have horrible judgments about people who procrastinate chronically. We just think bad things, and we know that, and we think those things about ourselves as we procrastinate. So as you procrastinate, you feel really guilty. You feel ashamed that people are going to know. That increases the negative emotions around the thing that you're trying to procrastinate, the thing that you're trying to get to. And as those negative emotions build, it's the negative emotions that are keeping you from doing the task you want to do anyway. And as the negative emotions from procrastinating get bigger around the task, it gets harder and harder and harder to do the task. There's all kinds of unhelpful cognitions around procrastination as well, where you have really mean judgments about yourself, like that you're broken in some way. What is wrong with me? I'm such a loser that I can't get to these. But you also have unhelpful cognitions that are just like wrong, like, well, I'm not in the mood to do it right now, but later I will be, so I'll be better at it. That's just wrong. So it's also unhelpful. Similarly, many of us in this virtual space are really smart people. That's how we ended up in academia. And we learned someplace along in school that we could do things fast because we're smart. So that assignment that might have taken your peers twice as long, you could do real fast as an undergrad. So you didn't have to plan that far in advance. So you started developing this idea. How many of you have thought this? I work better under pressure. I can do these great things super fast if there's a deadline in front of me. If the deadline is like right there, I work better under pressure. I'm more motivated under pressure. I create a better product under pressure. Yes? Just a little bit of that. That's also an unhelpful cognition because it's not true. It is not true. You don't work better under pressure. You may feel more pressure under pressure, but if you had a little more time, the product that you come out with is actually better. And then we have this interesting lack of cognitive connection to our future self. So in studies, if you ask people to imagine that they are their future self, a month from now, a week from now, tomorrow, 5 years from now. We don't have that much connection to that future self really any more than we do to another separate person. So we have all kinds of weird ideas, like that your future self is going to be somehow extra superpowered compared to your current self. And have all kinds of motivation and capacities that your current self doesn't have. Not true. Or that your future self, I'll leave it at that. And that lack of connection to our future self helps us generate these unhelpful beliefs of like, my future self can take care of this and is not going to be a problem because my current self cannot handle. So knowing some of these pieces of how we can manage our own procrastination, of where procrastination comes from, how can we use these to manage our own procrastination? So we're going to talk about that piece, and then we're going to talk about the classroom piece. So one big piece that has gotten a lot more attention in the last few years is self-compassion and forgiveness. We're not going to talk specifically about mindfulness, but mindfulness practices also fit in here. That if you practice mindfulness meditation can also help overcome procrastination for some of the similar reasons as listed here. So we have strong cultural beliefs that procrastination is associated with failure and laziness, like personal failures. So it's easy for us to fall into the pattern of, like, I am a bad person because I'm procrastinating, bad in some way. Or other people will think I'm a bad and lazy person if they find out that I'm procrastinating. And these really negatively emotion loaded ideas, we think we're using them to motivate ourselves. It is so bad that I'm doing this. I have got to get on it. Otherwise, it's a bad, bad thing. The difficulty with that is you're using procrastination as an emotion-focused coping mechanism. This scary thing that I really don't want to do, I'm going to procrastinate as a way to cope with it. Okay? So what happens when you make this add on top of the scary thing that now you also feel really terrible about yourself? This bad, scary thing I don't want to do, and I feel extra terrible about, and I feel terrible about myself. It increases the procrastination rather than motivating you. So if you can exercise some self-compassion, kind of remove some of that emotional baggage, it reduces procrastination going forward. And there have been some very nicely little designed experimental studies on this, that people who are taught to practice self-compassion, either in the moment or over a longer term period, reduce their procrastination over time. So I'm not just making this up. So how can you exercise self-compassion for ongoing procrastination? What does self-compassion mean? It means that, for example, that you respond with self-kindness rather than self-criticism. So I'm not a terrible person. How would you talk to somebody else that is procrastinating? Would you say, you are a terrible person, bad, lazy person? You wouldn't say that. You would say, I'm so sorry to hear that you're struggling with this. That sounds really difficult. You can say that to yourself too. You can also, self-compassion also includes feeling connected rather than isolated. And connected rather than isolated can just be in your thoughts, or you can literally connect to other people and say, I'm really struggling with this. But even in your own thoughts, you can think, I'm not the only one who struggles with this. I'm not alone in this. This is something that other people deal with. And being mindful of our own emotions rather than being too invested or identifying with them. In other words, taking a more mindful or observational approach of our emotions rather than getting like really stuck in them. So responding with self-compassion includes things like saying, this is really hard for me. It's hard for other people too. But that's not who I am. It's just what I'm feeling right now. Okay? Not getting too stuck. So that's for ongoing procrastination. What about things you procrastinated in the past? An opportunity that you let slip through your fingers because you were procrastinating, for example. Exercising some self-forgiveness for that instead of holding on to what a lazy, terrible person you are for letting that go can help to move forward and improve procrastination. About some other strategies. Reframing. Reframing is changing the way you're thinking about it. So one thing to know is that we're really terrible at predicting our future emotional states. So if one way that this has been looked at, I just thought it was interesting. Procrastination research is almost entirely done in academic settings because academia is both, it's easier to get subjects, right? You can get undergraduate students to do research, but it's also like as we talked about, like a situation in which procrastination is built in practically to our structure. So it's very easy to study. So predicting emotional states has been looked at in both academic settings and non-academic settings, like in a driver's exam, for example. But if you say like, how are you going to feel next week if you fail this test? How are you going to feel next week if you get an A on this test? We're really bad at that. We're good at saying whether we're going to feel good or bad. But we're not good at saying how long you're going to feel bad and how bad you're going to feel. We tend to overestimate. We tend to think that we're going to feel a lot worse than we actually do. And we tend to think that we're going to feel a lot worse a lot longer than we actually do. Why is this important in procrastination? Because if you think, oh, I have to do this task that I'm really going to hate, you're going to think, I'm going to hate it more than I actually will when I do it. And I'm going to hate it longer than I actually will when I get to it. And I think this is a common experience among people who chronically procrastinate, that it feels like this huge weight or like a beast on your back. And when you finally get to do the thing that you were putting off, like, well, that wasn't such a big deal. It was actually a lot faster than I thought it would be, or it was unpleasant, but I dealt with it. So we tend to overestimate. So knowing that you tend to overestimate can help you like get started on the task and see how it actually feels. You can also consider reframing the goal that you're trying to achieve more in terms of why and what instead of how. Because in procrastination, you're often thinking about, this is literally what I need to do. I need to do this and this and this and this, the how. But if you can reframe and think about, why am I doing this? Okay, email is my bugaboo. I just, email it's just, ugh. So many emails. I get so many. And everybody, and they're all important. They're all important to someone, even if they're not that important to me sometimes. They're all important to someone, otherwise they wouldn't have emailed me. Ugh. So if I focus on the how, I have to do 150 emails in this period. It feels really overwhelming and boring. Both of those things. But if I can focus on the why am I responding to these emails? Because these people are doing good work and I want to support their work. That can help. Or if I focus on, no, I'll just leave it at that. You can also focus on the satisfaction of smaller sub goals. So if you say I have this big thing to do, I'm going to split it up into sub goals. Make sure to celebrate at each sub goal and don't split it up so tiny that the smaller sub goals are not satisfying. You can also consider reframing a task from an I have to an I get to, because when we feel pressured, externally controlled, we respond with stress. Whereas if you feel like you have internal control, your stress levels drop. So if you can think of, I get to do this, what opportunities do I get from this task? So in my email example, I could reframe and say, I get to respond to these people because this is an opportunity for me to show that I care about them. Or this is an opportunity for me to use my assertive language and practice those skills. Or how can you find greater meaning and exercise more gratitude in them? All of these are reframing tasks that we can try and use. Preparing for the task is also a good idea, because even though I said that procrastination is not a time management issue, there are concrete things that you can do that can help you. So one is to make sure your task is clearly defined, even in your own head, because an ambiguous uncertain tasks are more scary and difficult to get started. And making sure that you can break it into smaller sub goals, as I said, that are not so small as to be meaningless, that can help you prepare. Another way to prepare is to prepare your environment. And this is more important than some people give it credit. So when you're overcoming procrastination, what you're doing is you're pitting your short-term goal of reducing your negative emotion by avoiding this task and procrastinating. You're pitting that goal against your long-term goal of actually completing your task. And those two goals are in your head at the same time. And you're trying to prioritize this one, even though it's long-term. And on an evolutionary basis, we really only want to care about the short-term stuff. So you're trying to prioritize this one. So you're also constantly responding to conscious and unconscious cues around you that can prime you for one or the other goal. So how can you reduce the cues around you that tell you to pay attention to the short-term goal and increase the cues around you that tell you to pay attention to the long-term goal? Okay? So you're trying to put the weight on the long-term goal. And one way to do that is move away from distracting stimuli. If you know that you have, you know, people who work in coffee shops, like they just need a change of scene. They're going to pick up their computer and go work at a coffee shop. This is part of that. If they know at home, they're likely to watch TV, to take a nap on the couch, to go bake something when they're supposed to be working on something. You go to the coffee shop, you've moved away from those distracting stimuli. If you build up stimuli that will encourage your long-term goal, it can also help. And building up those stimuli, it can include like a little note for yourself. You put a little note, I'm going to get ready to do this. Here's my note that says, you can do this. Just get it done. An example of this for folks who procrastinate behavior change. If you want to start going to the gym in the morning, you can sleep in your exercise clothes. So you don't have to take extra steps in the morning to go exercise. You can just get up and be ready to do it. And then just go, just do it. Why? Because even if you've done all those things, there are a lot of procrastinatory cognitions that can prevent you from getting started because you're waiting for the right moment, the right mood, the right inspiration, the right motivation, the right amount of time pressure. Those are all a trap. They're all false. If you wait, you can wait forever. Mood and motivation and inspiration are transitory, sometimes rapidly transitory, and often they follow action instead of preceding it. So if you just start something, your motivation can build as you're working on it, and your mood can improve as you're working on it. So all of these pieces are actually relevant to the classroom, but not as directly relevant as I would like. What can you do in the classroom? So in the classroom, we have the most control over our attitude and the contingencies around our grading and assignments. So those things we can control. So how can we control those things in the classroom to help our students with procrastination? So one is make it a no judgment zone. That's not a no grading zone. You're still grading, you're still evaluating whether they know the material. You're just not making a personal judgment about them at the same time. So if a student is procrastinating and failing assignments because they're not turning them in, a no judgment zone is that you can say, I'm sorry to see that you're not turning in your assignments. What's going on with that? Instead of saying, well, clearly you are not motivated and do not care about this class. It's making a judgment about the student. What you're doing there is you're increasing the shame associated with procrastination. What do we know with shame and procrastination? If you increase shame, you increase procrastination. So you're trying to take away the shame associated with it. They still get a 0 because they didn't turn it in. It's not like you're doing them any favors. But you know, it's not a judgment about them. It's just a 0 because they didn't get the assignment in. Making tasks clear and unambiguous can also help because tasks that are vague, people are more likely to procrastinate on them. So if you provide rubrics in advance, if you provide examples of past student work, anything that can make it absolutely clear, especially how to start, can help. Breaking up large projects into smaller sub-goals and setting deadlines for each of those sub-goals. Many of us already do that. for many, many learning reasons, but it also definitely helps with procrastination because if you assign a student an ambitious paper project, sometimes they've never done one before. This is the most scary, ambiguous assignment they may have ever gotten. So when you split it into sub-goals, it reduces the ambiguity, but also makes it a much more manageable task. And then I like this one because it's really easy. You can start challenging work in class together. So let's say you've got an ambitious project you want them to work on. You split it into sub-goals or sub projects. So let's say they're doing a paper. You're going to start with an annotated bibliography. Go find 3 resources relevant to your paper. Make a few notes about what each of the resources has to do with it. Well, even that is scary if somebody's never done it. So you can start it in class, 5 minutes of class time. You say, okay, so talk to the person next to you. Let's pick, by the end of class, I want you to have picked one example topic that you could work on. And on your phone, I want you to go to the Penfield Library site and put that term into one of the searches and give them like the link to use. It's just starting on it in class together because that initial super scary hump of like how in the world am I supposed to do that? Just get their little toe in the pool, and it can help with procrastination. This helps us too with our own procrastination. That if you can just get the toe in the pool, and sometimes that can be like talking to a colleague about a project that you're having a hard time starting. You don't have to, if you don't want to disclose everything about what you're struggling with, you don't have to, but you can say, I'm struggling with this piece, this one little piece. And just that conversation of like, oh, how about this? Just this one little search, just this one little thing, just this one email response, that toe in the pool can make it easier. I was a huge procrastinator as an undergrad. Didn't have any academic consequences for me because as many of you, I'm a smart person and academia is my jam. You want to give me undergrad assignments, I can do them. And the biggest thing that helped me when I got to grad school is that I went to a graduate program that had great librarians and a small library collection. So what did that mean? It meant that I had to interlibrary loan everything I need. Great librarians, small collection. And in those days, interlibrary loan came on hard copy. So if I had in graduate school a major paper due, which I always did because it was graduate school, I had to start my library research at least a month in advance in order to have the resources I needed to read them. So that external pressure of just go to the library as soon as you get the assignment, do a quick lit search, order in about 10 papers, start it that way, just that toe in the pool. I didn't have to read anything because there was nothing there to read. I just ordered stuff, that toe in the pool. It helps to get things moving. So other ideas you want to share, we will add them to the slide, drop them in the chat. I know we've only got about 2 minutes, but because I talked too long, sorry about that. But I will add them to the slides if you want. And at the same time, I will drop 2 links for you in the chat. I will try to drop 2 links for you in the chat. I think this works. Let's see. So there should be, yes. So there's a resource folder for you. It includes the slides. And there is also a feedback form that I would really appreciate if you take a minute to give me some feedback.
Kristen, do you have a minute for a question?
Yes.
I was just curious, in your work, have you come across, procrastination in the context of the task being a choice making instead of just completion of linear tasks? Because in choice making, that once you make a choice, you're going to forgo other options, and you tend
Kind of
to
a decisional paralysis.
Yeah, so I was
Yes.
just curious whether has there been any research that focused on, because I'm also looking at it from a consumer perspective. So
Yes, there certainly is. There's research on it also from a stress perspective that that being confronted with a set of positive choices where you essentially can't pick wrong is highly stressful, just like being confronted with a set of negative choices where all of your choices are wrong. Like if you're very sick, if you have cancer and you have to choose between the treatment options, all bad choices, super stressful. But also, do I want to take this job? Do I want to move? I want to take this other job? Yes, also very, very, very stressful. Any other final comments or thoughts?
So Kristen, I have one for you. So I have the opposite problem. What I had to learn was let it go for a day and then come back to it, in opposed to just keep banging my head against the wall to solve this programming problem or system problem or whatever. So it seems like it almost the same type of suffering, but you're trying to do something that you really need to let your brain process before you come back to it. And that's not a smaller problem. It's actually as big for
Yes.
A personalities like me.
And I think that's a great example. That's sagacious delay. You are increasing your skills for a wise delay. And it's also a great example because even though things like chronic procrastination, it has a trait-like component. It's fairly, for people who procrastinate a lot, it's fairly stable across situations, across time, over a lifespan, but that doesn't mean it's permanent. If you lean into your normal, your usual coping strategies over and over, then you keep using them. But if you choose to develop other skills, you can change and develop other skills, just like your example that you developed your skill for wise delay. The sleeping on it and letting it mull around is, for some problems, is a fabulous strategy. Any other final thoughts? John, anything to add?
No.
Good to see you all. Thank
Good.
you. Good to see you, Prabhakar. Jackie, I'm going to send you that measure if you want it. Okay.
Thank you.
See you all.
So we got an hour break.